Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ed Carbajal. And weekly, we are brought to you by AllAccessMMA.com. Check out AllAccessMMA.com for our video podcast, MMA news, and MMA stories. Ed, so after a week on the dark side watching some professional wrestling, I'm back and made it back just in time for crazy free agent news and a UFC pay per view.
Yeah, man, you were deeply missed, but I managed to swing it without you last week. But I know you were at the AEW event. I mean, I always like the number two pro wrestling promotion in the world. I guess I'm like just like that about everything. I prefer what most people aren't into, but AEW was kind of like one of my pandemic hobbies. I got into them when they were on and nothing else was on, and so they're fun to watch. I mean, I'm glad you made it out to an event. I made it. We were just talking before we started recording. I made it out to their first time at Arthur Ashe Stadium out here in the East Coast. So, and we both have a feather in the cap of the Coast to Coast Combat Hour podcast for some pro wrestling, and they're AEW feathers. So good stuff.
Yeah, no, it was entertaining. But even as far as I get away from MMA, I still managed to run into Chris Cyborg walking around the arena
That's
with a
right.
Bellator championship belt. So
Oh,
got a
did you
photo
post
with.
that picture?
I posted it on something, but not
Oh
a
yeah, you
ton.
got to put that up, man.
But yeah,
Yeah.
so that was kind of cool to see her and get a chance to chat for a couple seconds. They were kind of on their way out. So
Hmm.
um, but yeah. So, obviously we got the pay-per-view that we'll get into with our main card picks, and we have a legend on the prelims who will be stepping away from MMA apparently after this bout. But I think we got to jump in a little bit to the Francis Ngannou
Hmm.
talk here. I'm sure a lot of people maybe are already kind of tired of hearing about it since it's been headline news, but
Since like Saturday or Sunday, yeah.
yeah, but obviously Francis Ngannou, uh,
Saturday, I
free
think.
agent. Now UFC is doing what they didn't do with Randy Couture and Diaz and some of these others, and they're allowing him out of his contract without dragging it on for the extra year or so that they really could. Um, so we're kind of in a weird situation. We've seen similar situations similar with BJ Penn. Um, even to an extent, Randy Couture, but guys, Murilo Bustamante did it years and years ago in the UFC when you had guys that were UFC champions and arguably the number one fighter in their weight class. I don't think there's much argument in this one though. Um, Moving on to free agency and kind of disrupting the whole undisputed title talk that the UFC likes to put
Yeah.
out there.
You know what's funny is like every time, especially if it's as close to this scenario when it happens, it's always funny how Dana White will always say, "Oh, they want easier fights or they want to take less risk." There's always that little jab where he says it's because they don't want to do whatever the UFC is doing, so it's lesser than here. It's always that little jab, like he's saying like Ghana doesn't want to take risk, and then of course Helwani loves to put salt on any wound Dana White gets now. So he had him on his show yesterday, and I know Ngannou pretty much discussed his side of things, and it seemed like the stuff he was asking for was just stuff that was better for fighters, and the stuff that you keep hearing about fighter pay, healthcare, and so if that's any, I mean, nobody really knows happens behind these closed doors in these big money negotiations, but if there's any truth to either side, as far especially what Ngannou said, and I don't think he has any reason to lie about it, then it's just adds to the UFC, the whole corporate entity. What's the kingpin caricature that our boy Chris Rini, the way he draws, just adds to that whole persona. Um, there's times I like Dana White, and then there's times I don't like him, and a lot obviously lately not a lot of folks are liking picking up what he's putting down. So I think the sport's big enough now, though, especially for I'd like to see where Ngannou winds up. Um, Hopefully it's not boxing, but I would understand because of the pay. I mean, I would definitely like to see him fight any of the three names that came up. So
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned, the little jab on the way out, and I thought it was funny because he said that he wants to get paid more money to take easier fights. And wouldn't the opposite of that being staying for less money to take harder fights? Like they're prize fighters. Like that doesn't make any sense to me. So of course he
Mhm.
wants easier fights and more money. Like that's I don't know. Like common sense to me. But then again, in the same breath, it's like, well, I don't think fighting Tyson Fury is an easier fight, right?
No, especially if you go into his backyard of boxing, like under his, under, where
Yeah,
he,
Tyson
yeah,
Fury's gonna like mop the floor with him and knock him out. I mean, that's kind of what I think. I think Wilder. I think any of the top, you know, you know, top 10 heavyweights in the world probably eliminate him fairly easily.
yeah.
You
Like
know,
if we had Danny on here, or Joseph, my old editor from Front Proof Media, or any of those guys from the boxing podcast, the last round guys, if they were on right now with us, they would say literally they would. It's not even a question. If we look at every time an MMA fighter goes against a boxer, with the exception of Anderson Silva and Chavez Jr., you know, that's just the one fight. They lose all those fights. They lose it. So the senior man in the sport that they're experiencing, coming in up against somebody that's green to it, it's going to favor the senior man. So yeah, I mean, I know he's got that for the one punch knockout power, but that matters more against somebody like John Jones in MMA than somebody like Tyson
that
Fury in
yeah,
boxing.
because everybody in boxing in the top, you know, 30 heavyweights in the world have punching power.
Hmm.
For the relative. Obviously you had the Chris Birds, you had the guys who are more technicians, but big power punchers. There's 4 out of 5 of the guys will knock your block off. So, yeah, but I just think it's like, well, no, there's not the easier fights, and um, I mean, he that's what he seems to want to do, at least out the gate. So I don't think it's like he's run into PFL or something to go fight in
Mm,
their $1 million tournament. I mean, seems like the numbers are fairly. He didn't really deny the numbers of being pretty high from the numbers we've heard in the past for a UFC fighter. But like you said, he wanted to just not have to be locked into a contract for all time and eternity and be basically penalized for constantly winning.
mm.
The UFC, you only get out of your contract if you lose fights, and if it's so one sided, it just
And somebody posted like the list of like all the articles where Dana White always kind of says the same thing about, they want easier fights. I mean, they listed the Ngannou, Woodley. You just talked about Chris Cyborg. I mean, he said it's a weird situation when she got released, but he said the same thing. She let her go take easier fights.
Saint Pierre,
Yeah,
Aldo.
yeah.
Um,
And it's always it's always the same. There's a list of it, but it seems to be, when you look at the list and when those names, when it happened, it seems to be becoming more frequent. And I feel like that's a good sign that the sport of MMA is growing. Um, Josh Gross posted this thread that I didn't finish reading, but he said something along the lines like, because the UFC likes to say people are afraid, and um, he was like, "There's truth to it, but it's not the fighters that are afraid. I mean, for shit, they fight for a living. Like they're not afraid of much, but so
Yeah, coming from the
it's
one, the
it's a
promoter who's afraid to
exactly, yeah, yeah. That's pretty
co-promote.
much what he said, yeah.
You know, yeah,
And that's one of the points he made. Like they're afraid to co-promote, and then there's media that's afraid to, you know, this thing is you and I, like that's us doing our thing. So we're not really trying to impress anybody, because we do this because we like to do it. And but one of the things he mentions too, the UFC is scared, and the media that's not really talking about it, they're afraid of losing their credentials or whatever. So it was a really good post if Josh Gross on Twitter. I just what's his at Yee.
yeah. He's got a weird handle.
Yeah, yeah. But look at it. He put it up literally like before we recorded, maybe 2 hours ago. It's a nice little thread. I'll share it later when we're done recording so folks can read it. But I thought it was a nice read, and I didn't get to finish reading it, but he was making some really strong points that kind of like encompass what we're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what he's going to end up doing on the MMA side of stuff. I think boxing's inevitable right now. As much as MMA fans and MMA promoters want to talk about boxing being dead, it's amazing how that's like the money grab.
Mm,
That's the money that amazing where he'll probably go make 15 to 20 million dollars to fight one of those world top world champion
yeah.
boxers. And if he pulls off the huge upset, then
Hmm.
he makes a truckload the following fight. Even if he loses, he goes back to MMA. What's the worst case? He goes to PFL. They probably give him 5 million to sign, and then he goes and fights in $1 million tournament and cleans out the tournament and does that 3 years in a row. You know what I mean? Or he
Yeah.
goes to Bellator and I mean, for me, in a perfect world, Fedor wins in a couple weeks, retires. There's a vacant heavyweight belt. You know, Ngannou's in the crowd at CBS, and kind of passes the torch that way in kind of an odd way.
I
But
mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he's not there. I mean, usually these guys, when they're shopping around for a place to fight and there's somebody that these promoters want, they always get a free seat cage side.
yeah, they like to be
Yeah,
seen.
yeah, they
Yeah,
like to be seen. So I feel like that's something that I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him in a couple of weeks over there at Bellator 290, which again, like you said, free on CBS. So if you miss it, you're a dork.
yeah. Um, a couple things just from event notes. The one Colorado tickets went on sale last week, and they are it's in a smaller venue. Um, Probably about a 5,000 seat venue, but I checked ticket sales prior to coming on the show tonight, and they were doing really well. Um, Look like other than some of the cheaper seats, which are a little bit higher priced, which maybe they have to drop those couple sections. The vast majority of the good seats are all sold out. So looks like a good sale. It looks like it'll be a packed house in the first, I think it's First Bank Center in Broomfield, Colorado. So that's good for one. Bellator announced.
Well, speaking of one, we have to talk about Mikey Musumeci ripping apart my man's the Mongolian dude. I can't pronounce his name and I don't want to butcher it, but the guy that refused to tap in a submission only match. I mean, we talked about it. My training partners are talking about it. There's casual, like there's literally this is how you know Amazon on Prime is working out for one. There's people that don't that watched it that don't even know anything about MMA or jiu-jitsu that went up to me at my job and were just like, did you see that guy's leg get torn up? And I know South China Morning Post, I forget my man's name that we follow each other on Twitter now, his name escapes me, that he writes for the SCMP, but he interviewed Chatri and Chatri gave an update on the injury, and he was just Chatri equated it, said that the doctor compared the leg damage to him having been in a motorcycle accident. And I didn't see the clip until after the fact that Musumeci even looked at the referee and was like, "Yo, are you gonna stop this?" Because he kept hearing his leg pop, but
Yeah, torn ACL, torn MCL, torn
broken ankle.
meniscus, and broken ankle. Uh, you know, it was grotesque.
Mm-hmm.
Like but it was weird because normally I have to turn away a bunch during that stuff, and I kind of was, but then it was like all broken, and you're like, well, nothing worse is gonna happen. Well, everything's already broken. Like so now he's just got Gumby leg, um,
Yeah.
and it's really there is an interesting a guy at work asked me because I had a friend, not my I showed some of the stuff to my
Mm-hmm.
buddy at work, but I had another friend who was, I was going back and forth with him during the event who again because of Prime is watching these shows.
Yeah.
Um but the first thing my buddy at work goes is and the ref didn't stop it. And I kind of didn't really think about it until I was like, well, there was a moment where his foot was like completely inverted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so do we, but it's, I don't remember who the ref was for that fight. I don't think it was Herb Dean for that event.
No, it's definitely not anybody that we've seen before, and I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him again. There's some questionable refs I mean, it's been a topic of conversation amongst my training partners too. Like we're just talking with, there was an event out here in Jersey, and some of the refing when it's the crowd telling the ref that people are put to sleep, and then that's what cues them in to break them apart. That's you have to wonder if they're getting their ref from the same crowd, who might have had a few or not. But hey, man, Musumeci's tearing up. He's fun to watch over there at One Championship. Um, I like what they're doing, so I think that I wouldn't be surprised if he's on that Colorado card.
Yeah, I mean, Gary Tonin also picked up a nice quick win with
Oh
Kimura, so I
yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if he makes the Colorado card. I also saw Sage Northcutt tweeting about what how would the fans like to see him make his return
Hmm.
after he got devastated by Cosmo Alexander like 3-4 years ago now. I wonder if Kevin Nielsen, or one of our listeners, he had to been losing his mind watching that dude's leg just shredded into
I know he,
9,000
I didn't
pieces.
read it. I think he put out a newsletter and he might have mentioned it. I haven't read it yet, but yeah, Kevin Nicholson, if he does chime
Nicholson,
in,
sorry.
yeah, if he does chime in, I'm sure. Oh, there he
There he
is.
is.
Here we go. Let's read this from Mr. Nicholson himself. I've seen a lot of gruesome injuries and surgeries in my 30 plus years in healthcare, and that even turned my stomach. Awful. Yeah.
It was bizarre because like you want to blame the ref, but usually there's like a wince or like somebody kind of yelling in agony, or like, and it was like the dude was like stone faced while his leg was just being amputated in front of us, and it was like
If
it
you know,
was it was crazy.
I
It was
tweet a
it was
lot when I'm watching these things, and I even tweeted, I'm like, I think I might have tapped 50 times in the first 5 minutes that was happening myself,
you I
just
mean
watching
yeah.
it.
Mighty Mouse was doing play by play, and he was like, "Nah, like,
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah. He's like, I would
like
have
I want
tapped
to
it.
walk. I want
Yeah,
to. So
yeah.
I can only imagine when the adrenaline ran out, what kind of I I can't
Yeah.
imagine. I don't even.
Yeah.
It's but disgusting. But another successful event for one, and like I said, seems like they're getting a nice little roll going, and obviously a good U.S. Getting the U.S. market on board is going to be huge for them, because no matter how big you are in Asia, when it's all said and done, the money's in the
Mhm.
United States. So if they can manage to have a good live event here with successful fights,
Yeah.
a couple exciting fights, and they're able to do that 2-3 times a year,
Hmm.
um, kind of get to where Pride wanted to be towards their end.
Yeah.
Um, you never know. You never know. And I also noticed when I was reading it, Chatri said something, and it was an older article, but when he was talking about Colorado accepting the rules, he said he has multiple states that have accepted the rules. So he didn't name the other states, but I'm curious if that was just him kind of talking, or if there's actually
Yeah.
other states
Never
that
really
are
know
on
with him.
board with it.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. You never really know.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting because you don't need a bunch. You get Colorado, you get like 2 or 3 states on board early, that you can have one event there each state a year, and you can carry that for a couple years, and then as you build that U.S. audience.
I
So
would imagine when that happens, like other states will maybe by the summer we'll see other states after the event, if it's trending at all, and maybe some other states will pick it up. I know who'll be the last to pick it up, and that'll be New York State. They'll
no,
definitely be the last.
that's what I said. If we get Texas and Florida on board, though, you got Colorado, Texas, and Florida. You
Yeah.
can pretty much carry the torch for a while. Um, Bellator, they announced the lightweight Grand Prix. That kicks off in March uh, with Bellator 292. Nurmagomedov defends his title against oh gosh, our boy. I have it pulled up right
Benson.
here. Benson Henderson. Yeah, going crazy. Um, so that event added a couple more. Moldovsky to the card. Linton Vassell.
Hmm.
Um, Carrie Melendez making her return. So that looks good. Bellator's keeping the schedule going. Um, and obviously the CBS show in a couple weeks will
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we're gonna get more announcements during that broadcast because they just in that last week they announced the tournament. They added that fight today that you just mentioned, Vasyl Moldavsky, and a bunch of other stuff. I know Arlene Blanco, Aaron Jeffrey said they got fight news coming and they're signing with Bellator. So, I mean, there's definitely their second quarter looks like it's gonna be a lot of fun, and hopefully there's more than just that 290 card on CBS.
yeah, I mean, I just it does look like before the fans have a meltdown, I believe it's only going to be a 3 fight main card. So just before we lose our mind, there's 2 title
Mhm.
fights though, and Ward Hamaski. Um, so I think that's likely what's going to happen. I imagine CBS gave them a 2-hour window, and with 2 potential 5-round fights, they're going to play it safe. Perhaps they'll have some swing bouts that'll probably likely carry over from the prelims, because right now there are 11 scheduled prelims in a 3-hour window. So likely there'll be a couple post lims. If they're smart, they save one of those good fights and they have it as
Yeah,
a swing bout, that if these fights end quick on CBS, they can shoot another fight in between the title fights, and keep the action rolling. Um, where we don't get that live TV delay where we've seen in the past, where
Yeah.
they got to get their advertisers in. So that's the danger about live TV is the
Yeah.
commercials got to happen. So you can end up with a lot of chatter if for some reason you end up with a couple quick early knockouts. But hopefully
Mhm.
hopefully Coker's been through this already enough now,
Oh yeah.
that he's thinking this through, and CBS has also been through this in the past. This isn't a debut for CBS. It's been a
Mhm.
decade, but we're not. It's something they've done before, so they should realize that the fans are not going to be happy if there's an hour
Yeah.
delay before the Fedor fight. Um, with that said, I think we got to move on to the UFC pay per
Speaking
view.
of fights on regular TV, I mean, I know we're going to talk about the pay per view, but just I actually I didn't know this until today. The prelims that are featuring the legend Mister Mauricio Shogun Rua, that's going to be on ABC at 8 p.m. on Saturday. So that's some nice free MMA for everybody to watch. It looks like the card. I mean, outside of that featured prelim with Shogun against Potiera. This is in Brazil, by the way, for folks that don't know. Um, it should make for a fun night of fights this coming Saturday.
Yeah, I like the main card. Prelims are okay.
Hmm.
Um,
You want to
Few
know what's
names.
oddly enough? Just before, sorry to cut you off, but the early prelims are pretty stacked. Um, who did I see on there? That yeah, like Terrence McKinney's on the Fight Pass prelims.
Warley
Uh,
Alves
yeah,
is good. Yeah, no, I mean
Cody's
Cody
on there.
Stamen. There's
Hmm.
some names, but it's not the prelims aren't carrying this event. I think this event it's got a solid main card,
Hmm.
with some good fights and a lot and all name fighters, which is sadly becoming kind of a rarity these days.
Hmm.
I think most fans, even if you're kind of a casual, you have a connection to all 10 fighters on the main card. So you mentioned Mauricio Hua. Um, I just mentioned Fedor. Most
Hmm.
likely his retirement fight in 2.5 weeks. Um, eh, it's sad. You don't want to see these guys fight past their prime, and we've seen that unfortunately. But at the same time, my God, man, for me specifically, and I don't know about you, but Shogun's one of those guys that's like, without Shogun, who I don't know if I'm a fan of this sport like I am.
Hmm.
I mean, he was the excitement that this dude put on in Pride, and then
Yeah.
his coming to the UFC and eventually winning the UFC title after a tough debut loss. Coming off of bad knee injuries, and then knocking out you know uh, Machida and winning the championship, and um, defending and fighting Liddell, and just going through and fighting the guys. I mean, I don't know. To me, he's a legend, and he's somebody that
Yeah. He fought everyone he was supposed to fight when the sport was on the rise, and like there wasn't any time that during that time that you're talking about, those were the guys there wasn't any ducking around there or the stuff you see today. He fought everyone he was supposed to fight, and even up until recently he was still trying to stay in that kind of momentum of fighting. you know there's a one point when he was talking about thinking he had another title run a couple of years ago in him, but I mean that's just to show you the kind of guy he was. It was him and his brother used to fight. Well, who broke his arm? Was it him that broke his arm in Pride?
Yeah, he
When
broke
he,
his arm when he fought Mark Coleman the first time. He
yeah,
posted on a
yeah,
takedown and his arm
yeah.
snapped.
The-
But I mean,
I always look at his arm when because the fact that he came back from that because that was a pretty bad break.
yeah. But I mean, his fights with Dan Henderson, especially his first fight with Dan Henderson, his first fight with Lil Nog,
Mhm.
his fight with Rampage. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's being older and just not appreciating certain things as much when it comes to or seeing the world differently now that we're older. Things are not as important as when I was 23 and I thought Shogun winning the Grand Prix was something that was world earth shattering. But it just I don't know. Do we have people like this anymore? Like I just wonder if 20 years from now who's going to be that next guy that like you're going to be going, oh, that's the legend retiring. I mean, I just don't know. I don't know if you're going to you don't have with what unless one or something takes off where you start getting like that spectacle. Shogun was built off of the spectacle of the
Mhm.
fireworks and the entrances and like we talked about with other guests, the rivalries that he came up with between Shooter Box and Brazilian Top Team and Hammer House and uh, all those clubs that it was a gang war back then, and
Mhm.
guys, you kind of had to choose your color and you went to war, and
Yeah.
um, and I don't know, but I have nothing but admiration for Shogun Hua, and I hope he picks up a nice win in this fight.
Yeah, it's
Um,
always nice to see if they're gonna retire and walk away for good. It's always nice to see if they can do it on a W. So, you know.
and
um,
his career started in Meca Vale Tudo, which was in Brazil. It was one of the tape trading companies, or not companies, but one of the tapes that I used to try to trade in the early 2000s. I'd get the VHS tapes of Mecha and Best of Mecha, where you had
mhm,
early Anderson and early Shogun. So I hope he does. Best wishes to him. But
mhm.
yeah, you jump to the main card. Paul Craig, a guy who's fought twice, is one of the guys opening the card up. Paul Craig versus Johnny Walker. Um, you know, I see this fight. Uh, I is that I guess I'm looking at the odds down below.
Yeah, they're
I
the
disagree with the odds. The odd makers on UFC.com have Johnny Walker as a minus 170 favorite.
the odds are from DraftKings, as of today when we're recording Wednesday. So, I go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off,
No,
but
I mean,
yeah.
I see Paul Craig getting this fight down to the ground and winning with some kind of submission or even getting like a mounted position and winning by TKO. I think the long limbs of Johnny Walker will be dangerous.
Mm,
I think that's targets for 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 Paul Craig, who's pulled off some impressive submissions, and I see him winning this fight. I'm not sold on Johnny Walker. I
mhm.
thought he had some fun fights early, he had the flashes, but I'm not I'm not s- I need to see something else to really think that like he's that as far as
Yeah.
um a real true contender. And I don't think either of these guys are world champion, but I do think that the threat of the submission is
Mm.
dangerous, and I think he figures out a way to lock up something on the ground.
Yeah, he's plus 145, so I would imagine if you do a prop bet on him winning by submission, which the stats on UFC.com have it at 81%. That's how he Craig wins by. You'd have to see what type of numbers what type of money that would get you if you make that bet. But I got to disagree with you on this one, just because they're in Brazil. I feel like I think there is such a thing for home field advantage for them this time around, just because of all the fighters that have been Brazilian fighters that keep saying that they wanted to fight there and they're there. I feel like that just might put a little more heat on those punches coming from Walker. So I'll probably be wrong, but I still think I think Walker can win it early if he does win it. So I'm gonna go with Johnny Walker for my picks.
Yeah, you mentioned the Brazil. It's definitely not going to help the non-Brazilian fighters in a
Hmm.
decision. So we'll see how that goes. And Craig could end up also in his guard and just not be able to get a submission and lead
Hmm.
to taking a hard shot and turning the momentum of the
Yeah,
fight.
but I'm not gonna disagree. I mean, everything you said about Walker and like that point up until he did his thing and then dislocated his own shoulder. That he was the guy, and then he wasn't. So yeah, I hear what you're saying. uh,
That leads us to a flyweight women's bout. Jessica Andrade, Lauren Murphy. Lauren Murphy ranked number 4, Andrade ranked number 6. you know, um, you, you might have just persuaded me a little bit with your Brazilian talk there about the event
mhm,
location. I was kind of, you know, Lauren Murphy just seems to figure out a way to grind things out.
mhm.
Um, if you mind scrolling down, I'm curious what the odds are showing for this one.
Plus
Um,
360 for Lauren
Andrade's a
Murphy.
huge favorite, which I just feel like she might be slightly undersized. She generally, she fought at 115. She's fought up to 135 in her career, so she's been all over the place.
Hmm.
But part of me wants to. we're getting. Let's see. Kevin's giving us an update. This might. Uh, see, Andrade is coming back after spine surgery. He has Lauren Murphy with upset. That's kind of where I was leaning. I
Yeah,
don't think it's going to be really that impressive,
Lauren
but I
Murphy.
could
I'm
see
sorry.
her. I could see her kind of keeping the feet on or fight on the feet and just kind of ugly boxing. I don't know what other term to really use, but just kind of jabbing and moving her way to a decision win, which obviously will not be a favorite of the Brazilian crowd, but I
Hmm.
could see it happening.
Yeah.
You
No,
know, kind of
it's
where I'm
fun.
going.
Yeah, no, I'm leaning Murphy by decision too. I mean, she does grind fighters out, but I just feel like if you're looking at what's there's a new word out there because the whatever the cage equivalent of ring generalship is. I feel like in this fight, Lauren Murphy not only has it, but if you look at their past fights, I mean the stats here on the UFC webpage have her with a height, a reach advantage, and a height advantage. I just feel like Murphy probably has more ways to win versus Andrade just kind of like muscling her way to a victory. I think she's got the chance. She probably has more knockout power than Murphy, but I think Murphy's just smart enough for that. I got her winning by decision too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think she clearly has more knockout power, and I think that's
Mm.
her pathway to victory. Um, I think Lauren Murphy figures out a way to grind it out. I don't think we should be too swayed by her loss to Shevchenko. That's
Mm.
that
Yeah, come on.
that changes people's opinions, and that might have something to do
Yeah.
with those odds. But minus 450 seems crazy. An Andrade possible Craig parlay with two underdogs looks like it could. I'm sorry, a Murphy Craig
Yeah.
parlay
Might bring you some
might
money.
have
Yeah.
some value on that. So that moves us to the featured bout of the evening: Gilbert Ed's boy Burns
Oh
versus
wow,
Neil
Neil Magny.
Magny.
What are they changing his graphic? Why they get rid of him?
We're being blocked out of the website now that
Yeah.
they're breaking his photo. So Neil Magny, Gilbert Burns. You know, I feel like I can't just sit here and pick constant underdogs in all these fights, but you know, I kind of am
Like.
leaning towards another jog and jab win, and
Mm,
maybe just some. But I'm gonna go with Gilbert Burns. I do think that it being in Brazil, I think it'd be too strong for Magny.
yeah.
I also think he's kind of pissed off about the situation of his division. He, in his press conference, he kind of was talking about how he's sick of just nobody moving around, nobody fighting each other. It kind of just being the same, uh, you know, top of the food chain between Masvidal, Edwards, and Usman. Um, so I'm gonna go with Gilbert Burns. A decision, probably fairly dominant, but I wouldn't be surprised if Neil Magny figures out a way just to. I mean, he's done it a million times. He's tied for the all-time uh, amount of wins in welterweight history, or did he own the record now? I can't recall
Mm,
exactly. But that's nothing to to ignore. But I'll go with Gilbert Burns in Brazil, and I feel like he's hungry and
yeah, and
and needs a big win.
he's been pretty excited about it for a while since the card was announced. So I'm also picking Burns on this on the in that matchup. And then we get to my main event. I mean, holy shit!
The
I'll
four.
watch these guys. I'll watch these guys fight every weekend if they're in every pay per view for Davidson Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno. This is the fourth one, right?
Number four.
Yeah, I'm not tired of it at all. like, like I mean, I'm gonna go with Moreno just because of again that's my Mexican coming out of me. But I mean, looking at them face off today, usually in the times that it didn't favor the matchups that didn't favor Figueiredo, you could see on fight week where if he kind of wasn't there, and I'm not seeing that this time. I'm actually seeing him. I'm actually seeing him. He looks dangerous, but so does Moreno. Yeah, whatever, dude. Just my pick officially is Moreno, but fuck, dude.
Good
Like,
fight.
yeah,
Good fight.
I'll probably be up till 3 a.m. if it's anything like the last three times.
You know, history tells us that it's due to be a stinker. which kind of, I mean, we don't see. I don't even know what you'd call 4 fights. It's not a trilogy,
That's blasphemy. I think
whatever. Um, you know, I mean, there's that concern that these guys have beat the hell out of each other. Now they have wins over each other officially.
Mhm.
So there's a little bit of that apprehension, maybe. Let's hope not, because we've seen no signs of that in their first 3 bouts. Um, I'm going with Figueiredo this time. I picked Moreno last time based off of the domination he had in Arizona. But I think Figueiredo might. It, the reports are that his weight cut was going well. So if
Yeah.
that's true and that's not just some kind of cover story,
He's got a
um,
horrible poker face too. So, like I said, you could tell if things are going all right for him, and when something's wrong.
yeah, so if
So,
everything's going right, if he looks healthy, if he's gonna got a clean weight cut in Brazil, um, I think I think he wins this fight. I think Moreno and I don't want to take away from Moreno because no matter what I say is gonna kind of, but I feel like
mhm.
he might have kind of peaked with that title shot or that title win, um, and that not so much peaked skill wise, but just kind of peaked at like world championship level, and I do think it's kind of cool that the photos on UFC they have them both with belts, like this is coming up to a draw or something.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so, but it's 1-1-1 is the trilogy so far, and as we go into the fourth fight, so I'm picking Figueiredo. I just think that I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks Moreno might have slightly peaked, and we may not, winning, being the world champion might not. So I think there's a lot of good fights in his future. He's still young, but I just think Figueiredo we might see that we might see that guy that we kind of all thought like we were dealing with kind of when this series started, like a guy like this guy might be unbeatable like once he kind of figures everything out, and if he's got his weight under control, I think he might do it. So I'm gonna take Figueiredo. I think a decision. I think any kind of finish. um I mean, I
Yeah.
know Moreno finished him in the second fight, but I feel like that was kind of like,
Although, yeah, I mean, the more they know each other from fighting, in the live fight for the title the way they have, I think the odds of a finish coming are probably harder because they know each other so well now. Um, but I disagree with you. I don't think it's going to be a stinker.
oh,
I
I'm
think
not
it's gonna,
saying it is. I'm just saying that the MMA gods, hopefully that's not the case, because you wonder, uh, you put 4 guys in the cage against each other 2 guys against each other 4 times, the odds of it being 4 bangers is I mean, we've never seen it. So this is kind of
we've also
uncharted
never seen a
territory.
four number four like
Not in the UFC.
yeah.
Tim Sylvia and Arlovsky fought 4 times. They finished
Hmm.
their fourth fight for one, which ended up in a soccer kick win for. But they had their stinker in fight number 2, I believe.
Mm.
Maybe 3. It was actually 3. Because they fought early on. I actually went to the first 2, and then I managed to avoid the trilogy, which was the I think it was UFC 65, where it was kind of a really really boring fight. Um, but what real quick before we go into the main event, what was the odds? I missed that when you scrolled. How are the odds makers showing this fight?
110.
100%. We
One
got two.
minus
We got
one.
guys with belts on each shoulder, and they're both. It's a coin flip minus 110 for both. I mean, I agree with it. I think Figueiredo um,
Do they have any other odds up? I just
takes
wanted to
this.
see. Yeah, I mean,
Oh, there's odds. Okay, so they have the money lines even, the over four
four
and
and
a
a half rounds.
half.
Yeah.
That's it. I it's kind of the people's main event, but we'll see. But I say that, and then I feel like we're kind of moving up. The main event even has one of the people's uh, former champions trying to get his belt back, in Glover Teixeira, fighting Jamal Hill, who kind of moves into the slot based off of the Blakovic
Hmm.
Ankilev draw. He was really the winner of that situation because he
Yeah.
gets this fight. Glover was likely to fight the winner no matter what, so a title fight most likely was going to be in his future. This is a little quicker than probably he would have expected, obviously, with the month, only a month following that other title fight. I'm going with Glover. I think that he old man strengths this dude and gets him down and does him dirty. I think Glover. I think we might be in for
Mm.
a beat down, like Anthony Smith. I'm not saying he's knocking his teeth out, but I could see a
Yeah,
little. I could see a little bit of a lesson here to the younger fighter.
I
That's
mean, I don't know, man. I mean, I'm gonna go to Glover just because I want him to win, and again, it's in Brazil, kind of where he wanted it to happen too, and but let's not discount. I mean, he is coming off a loss. Let's not discount Mr. Hill. He's actually, if the odds have Glover as the underdog, plus 105, and Hill as a favorite at minus 125. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if you're looking at these numbers here. If he'll land some power shots early that hurt Glover, we could see we could see these odds play out. But I'm just like you said, for old time's sake, I'm picking Glover Teixeira to win.
Yeah, I kind of see the nice little side choke, the head and arm,
Hmm.
working his way, and that's been
Oh
one
yeah,
of his
if he gets it, I'd love it. Yeah.
yeah. So well, yeah. I mean, I think it's gonna be exciting pay per view. It's this Saturday, like you said. Prelims are on ABC,
Hmm.
and then you got the normal pay per view, ESPN Plus gig that they got going over there.
So
Um,
really quick, just because I want to try to do this for later. I have Walker, Murphy, Burns, Moreno, and Glover.
and for
So
the UFC 283 pay per view, I got Craig, Murphy, Burns, Figueiredo, and Old Man Teixeira.
cool. All right.
Tell,
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
fans can check us out at Combat Hour on Twitter, Coast to Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Follow me at MMA Hawk 21 on Twitter and Instagram. Follow Ed at Carbizol on Twitter, Carbeerzol on Instagram, and Old Head Carb on Twitch. And as always, you can check us out at allaccessmma.com for our video podcast. Thank you for the comments, Kevin, as usual, and hope everybody enjoys the fights as they approach this weekend. Also, Invicta is on right now on YouTube.
Yep.
Just started about 30 minutes ago. So you
So
want your
cool.
MMA fix for a Wednesday night? Check out Invicta Fighting Championship.